What is happening, everybody? Welcome to another Dev Q&A, one that I am really excited for yet again, because I'm joined today by one of our senior games programmers, David. How you going, David? Are you well?
Hey, hello, mate. Well, doing well,
Good,
thanks.
good. So we were just discussing prior to this, you are a senior gameplay programmer specifically, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So, give me an example of the sort of things that you'd normally be working on a day-to-day basis.
So, in broadest way possible, let's say, I am tackling everything that has. So, basically, with anything that moves in the game, I'm somehow responsible in one way or another. So, if it's a character, if it's a player interaction, if it has something to do with the player input, if it has to do with the camera, if it, but the main task that I do is basically translating the player's input to some movement on the screen, like in
That
the broadest possible
Yeah, I was
sense.
gonna say that's a pretty wide spectrum of things that you're
Yes.
working with. So I know currently you're working on sort of the destruction of some of the vehicles and stuff, and I can imagine that's quite a mind-blowing task to try and wrap your head around.
Yes, it is. Actually, so I'm so to say feature owner on our 3C team,
Hmm.
which means character control and camera.
Yep.
So, and in this sense, vehicle is also can be considered as one of the characters in that sense because
Yeah, I can
it's
see that.
kind of an entity that you control in the game.
Yep.
Um, and just by that, yes, I'm so mostly tasked with anything related to the vehicle.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest features in that is the vehicle destruction,
Yep.
uh, interaction with other players, interaction with environment, or yeah,
So just
anything in
and
between.
how all that comes together as well, I'm guessing, as sort of,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah. Okay, cool. So like whenever we're ejecting out of the car, or whenever we see the car get smashed up or anything, that's what you've had your hands on effectively.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And do you do all of this? It's all within Unreal. Is it using like the standard graphical interface, or is it a lot of hand coding?
So uh, technically, everything is within Unreal. So
Mhm.
Unreal is our like main machinery behind everything.
Yeah.
Of course, our vehicles are produced in some different software packages, and the so to say the destruction is simulated, and then so it's simulated in an external software. But
Yeah.
then we collect the data, clean it up, and plug it into our game. This is not really my task directly. This is
Yeah.
more like of an art thing. What's my task at the moment is to detect the events that
Mhm.
happen. So, for example, two vehicles collide at a specific velocity, at a specific angle, whatever preconditions there are, and then we have a system which then shows that visually on the vehicle. So it applies appropriate damage to
Yeah.
both vehicles or to anyone involved. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
S-
So it's so we are trying to avoid having some presets. So to say that that your deformation would always look exactly the same
mhm.
regardless of the conditions that happened before. So we are looking for some way of making that a little bit procedural, or to making it, and by that it would always look a bit more realistic than
Okay.
if
Cool.
the same damage pattern would reappear. So that's
Oh, that's
one of my current tasks.
just, I mean, just you explaining it there, it does sound like huge, because you'd have to then theoretically have different thresholds of how fast the car is going and how hard it impacts. And then you'd have to be like, okay, so this then accesses these series of damage effects. And if it's going faster, there's another set of damage effects, etc.
So not really. You're kind of right in a sense that we do have a threshold under
Hmm.
which nothing is happening, but then we are just scaling the effect linearly. So you don't have the discrete
Yeah.
damages, let's say, or the aftermath of each individual, but the damage is scaling basically, and then of course the aftermath is one kind of a continuous function of the of the damage received. So, but in a sense that yes, we do have some thresholds, and we do have some, so to say, interesting points on the vehicles where, for example, if a vehicle is, if you are overtaking someone and you hit them in the back wheel,
Yep.
they should spin out.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm at liberty of saying that we are applying some additional forces there to exaggerate the
Okay, yeah.
effect. So it's not like a pure out of the box simulation. So we are adding some forces and some torques and whatnot
Yeah.
to to exaggerate that effect and to mimic some what we called Hollywood collision,
So,
which
making it more
rarely happens in
Stuntfest.
real life, but
Yeah,
it needs to be like amplified and exaggerated and insane in the end.
yeah, I definitely for the sort of thing we're going for within Stuntfest World Tour, it makes sense to have something a bit more Hollywood styled rather than the hyper realistic of other sort of racing games and things like that. So
Exactly.
it's
Yes.
cool to see how we're applying that. Now, how long have you been a programmer for?
Uh, you mean in the Power or
Just
in
in general,
general?
like as a whole.
Well, after learning uh, my native language, I have learned basic immediately afterwards. So, no, just kidding. But I was dabbling in programming since ground school, I would say, since I was like 11, 12,
Oh wow,
something
okay.
like that. But of course, that was like nowhere near the things that I do now.
Mhm.
But my like first contact, and even then, it kind of sparked the interest in maybe I could program games or like
Yeah, cool.
this is so I started with that, and of course, like many programmers, I at that time I have started with Basic, which was
Mhm.
this, like as the name suggests, also like pretty simple, pretty basic programming language, but
Yep.
also one that's pretty easy to learn. Because I mean, as if I remember it correctly, it was quite quite simple to write. Like you didn't have to write like this verbose code to perform something or so on. You didn't have to think about like ten steps ahead or anything.
Yeah.
It was pretty much straightforward. Um, and yeah, from there, but I mean, long story short, professionally, I have started working as a programmer some, I would say 10 to 11 years ago,
Okay, so you've
something
been
like that.
around for quite some time when it comes to
Yes.
programming. So, is
Yeah,
this what you're doing Stuntfest? Like in terms of challenges you've had in your career so far, whereabout does Stuntfest come? Is it like the most challenging thing you've done,
so,
or?
so on 0 to 10 scale,
Mhm.
it's 75. I would say. No, no, I'm kidding. So Stuntfest is challenging. I cannot deny that, and we
Mhm.
are facing some problems that we, or at least I personally see for the first time. And a few years ago, I would even consider those to be impossible to solve,
Wow. Okay.
based on that knowledge that I had back then. But yeah, I mean, over time, you learn stuff and you figure out how the stuff is done in by other people and other games and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but it is a pretty difficult. So in my previous projects, I have worked also on some really difficult problems,
Mhm.
but it was a different kind of difficult,
Okay.
So in one of previous companies, we were, for example, limited by the hardware, where we had this tiny microcontroller, and we had to make like super optimized code that needs to run on that tiny thing and
Yeah.
only on that tiny thing. So
Okay.
the code itself was kind of simplistic, and the games were kind of simplistic, but they had to be executed on some super low power device.
Mhm.
To I, I mean, for comparison, you probably have more powerful CPU in your headphones than that thing was. So that was a different kind of difficulty with Stunfest, and let's say vehicle in particular, because this is where I'm spending most of the time. I would say that we have close to 30 components on that vehicle that all need to work in sync, and it needs to be kind of a composition that
And
is,
that's
yeah.
like only in one area of the game where everything, all these tiny pieces have to all move at the same time, and then that plugs into all these other pieces that we've been doing the different QAs about. It always blows my mind, and I've said this every Q&A so far, but it still continues to blow me away that being so new to the games industry, I always had like a basic understanding of how video games work and all the different sort of schools that came together. But now actually getting to chat with the people who are boots on the ground making these different components, it blows me away just how, when you get down to the nitty gritty, how many little things come together to make the big thing. And it's even like as simple as, well, I say it's simple, like if we were to put a Stuntfest car just into a wall at full speed and it will auto deform, all the different parts that come together, you have obviously the programming that actually programs the car to move once you press the button input. You've got the programming that deforms the car once it hits the wall, that figures out how fast it's going, how hard it hits, what should deform. Then you've got the audio, you've got like the animation and how all of this comes together. And then you've got obviously art to make the car, make it look pretty, make the wall look pretty, and then that's like 30 seconds worth of gameplay, maybe at most. And it's just like that's, and there's
It's
so, and then when you start plugging in random variables, like what if three cars crash? What if the person ejects beforehand? And it's like, okay, now we're getting complicated, and things start building up so rapidly.
I mean, luckily, this also plays into the thing I mentioned before, but that's the thing we are trying to make an adaptive system. So it's not only that we need to predict each possible combination of
Mhm.
events that would be impossible. We would have billions of events that
Yeah,
would occur. But we are trying to make a generic system which then works in most of the situations. And then
mhm.
for some edge cases, we would add something extra to make it to give it a little bit more oomph or like make it a bit more spectacular in the
That's
end.
cool. That always is
Um,
fun.
but yeah, this is so since you have mentioned all of these things to I would even say all these disciplines working together. It is what I have found most joy in, especially working in powwow, because we are kind of close together, all of
Yeah.
us, and we have this like super friendly environment to work in. The thing is, I need to consider, like I said, with an animator, with an artist, with a sound designer, with so you have interviewed Christina already. She's
Yeah.
developing like the character, so the vehicle and the character need to interact somehow. So we also need to consider that, and the difference is between the Stunfest now with my previous projects is that I didn't really have, so except one project maybe before that, I didn't really have an opportunity where I need to think about tens of other people who will
Okay. Yeah.
also whose work will be also influenced if I mess something up or if I make something unusable for them. It's also an issue. So you're not alone in this project. You always have like yeah at least 10 people working with you on some on solving some let's say player experience in the end.
Yeah. So I guess that's
No.
kind of cool as well, because maybe if you're like, I don't know if I particularly like this, or how this feels. I wonder what other people think, or if it's just me. It means you get, it's a lot less of an echo chamber where it's just your own voice constantly, but you get to bounce off other people, both to solve issues or to improve areas that you're not quite sure on. There's definitely one thing that I've noticed at Powwow, that I was always like a little bit like, holy shit, I'm the community manager, these guys are actual devs and they're working like real hard and all these other things. But then the second that I approach someone being like, hey, could you explain how this works, or could you run me through exactly what's going on, like with yourself yesterday, I asked you about, the explain to me like I'm five what you were actually doing currently, and you were like, yeah, sure, no worries. And it's definitely, the atmosphere is super friendly, that if ever you want to ask somebody about something, because everyone's so passionate about what they're doing, they're more than happy to explain it to you, because it's like, yeah, look, come look, it's so cool, check it out. And do you find like, with the stuff that you're doing within Power, like, so how long is it specifically that you've been at Powwow?
Well, I have been for a bit more than 2.5 years.
Hmm.
So I think I was employed in a second round of let's say employees,
Yep.
where the company started with only like a handful of people, including the founders and like just the closest or the like the first yeah in Indian founders I can
Yeah.
say it that way like just a handful of people, and then we grew to 25-ish people or something.
Hmm.
I cannot remember exactly, but
Yeah.
I was in that batch, so some 2.5 years basically.
So like pretty much, yeah, pretty much in at the ground level when stuff started like ticking along.
Yeah.
So, do you find that working with people simplifies things, or do you find it complicates things?
So this is something I had to learn the hard way, actually. Although you could say it complicates things, of course.
Mhm.
Like there are many more moving elements, and um, the complexity grows non-linearly, let's say, with
Yeah.
each added person. But the problem for that is you cannot make anything without people. So
Yeah,
there is
100%.
no alternative. So this is, yes, this is more complex, but it also enables the thing.
Yeah.
Without the team, you are doomed. Like there is no way. If we would scale the team, if we would have our team, let's say,
Mhm.
we would never finish this game.
No,
Like
no way.
that's my
No
honest
way. It
opinion, to be honest.
it would be
So
crazy.
yeah, I mean, of course, compared to smaller projects, everything is more complex
Mhm.
with such. But it's not that it's a problem of more people. It's just the complexity of the task, I would say.
Yeah, that's fair. Some people say,
Mm,
like, obviously having more people taking on more jobs is great, but sometimes too many cooks can overcomplicate things. But I think we've hit
that's it.
like quite a nice balance that we've got a lot of people that are passionate, happy, and are hardworking, working in their disciplines, and then there's small connections being made between all the other teams that really brings everything together, which is cool. In your 2.5 years, I imagine you tackled quite a few problems in Stuntfest. Is there anything right now in the current version that you're like, I did that and I'm super proud of it?
So this is the problem with this. What I will say is that vehicle behavior, vehicle driving,
Mhm.
vehicle feel, or so on, is really subjective. So
Yeah.
some people like arcade, some like simulation, some like this type of simulation, and yet another one like this, like simulcade. But still, that doesn't remove from the fact that the vehicle, the whole like driving experience of the vehicle, is something I have probably spent
Yeah.
most of my time on. Um, so figuring out, so I had some limited experience before with
Mhm.
the vehicle simulation, but figuring out how to take this basic implementation of the vehicle that we had at the beginning and to bring it to a level that where I'm no longer ashamed, even when compared against some multi-million like AAA titles,
Yeah.
is like an amazing feeling.
Go.
Yeah, and of course, as I said, it's a controversial topic. Some players might think it's too arcadey. Some might think it's too difficult to simulate.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, but of course, you can never blame players for that. Everyone has their own preference,
Yeah.
and we need to decide for one thing and go with it. And that's the difficult part to find
100%.
the
And
good thing there.
I definitely find on PC the added element of what control scheme they're using can can then overcomplicate it even more. For instance, I've played Stuntfest on my controller. I've only ever played Stuntfest on my controller. I've never had any issues in terms of controlling the vehicles. I've been able to put them around corners and do all sorts with them and generally been quite happy. Admittedly, I'm not the most hardcore racing game player in the world, but I've been having a lot of fun with what we've got. And yet then some people in feedback we've got have been like, "Ah, it's not quite how I like it, and it's not quite how I like it." And it's picking the constructive, like, okay, cool, that's something we can work with and maybe tweak a few numbers. I definitely find with driving, it's or at least with Stuntfest driving, it's that really sort of straddling the line between arcadey pick up and play, but then with the extra layer that the more you drive the vehicles, you'll eventually get a favorite that you'll get better at, and you'll figure out how it drifts, and then you tweak it, and that's what I find quite crazy because I loved the truck, and now I love the supercar as I've used it more and more and more, and I'm there's a couple of cars that we've got being worked on that I'm like visually that's the car I want to drive, but if it doesn't handle like how I like the supercar handles, maybe I won't play it in the end. But I'm
Um,
keeping a close eye on them.
I mean, I'm probably not allowed to reveal too much, but I guess we will be fine. Let's put it that way. We
Yeah,
will do
I've
something
got to
for
be
that.
really candid about what we can talk about at length. There's loads of things that I
Exactly.
want to talk about, but
Uh,
we'll do another Q&A where we can go in depth and really like have a laugh about some of the cars and stuff. But so in terms of sort of the vehicles and everything that you've been working on, when it comes to tweaking the driving and working and working and working on that, do you find it to be a lot of um you'll tweak a couple of numbers, you'll play it a little bit, you'll tweak a couple more numbers, you'll play it, and it's a lot of dialing left and right to see if you can get it sweet, or like what's
So
the normal process that you'd go through for that?
yeah. So being a programmer, I'm not really, so to say, tasked by to tweak
Mhm.
everything and to find some perfect numbers there. But I still enjoy it and I do it as often as I can. And this is exactly the process that you have described. Still, we have our so I'm collaborating with our colleagues who are more involved into balancing the vehicle exactly to the player experience that we want to communicate.
Yep.
But this is exactly the so when I do it, and I always need to go with some default values and kind of trying to find some middle ground for the vehicle so they can start from there and then refine it and make it tune it to kind of perfection, let's say. Um, the problem is you get used to the vehicle, so you
Yep.
will tweak it, you will play it, tweak it again, play it, and you will lose sense of how it is to play as a complete beginner or to play as someone maybe not a beginner but maybe someone who plays with that particular vehicle
Yeah.
for the first time. And this is one pretty difficult problem to solve. Like it's not a technical problem. It's more of let's say human behavioral problem, where then I would need to let go for 3 4 days, work on something else, just to lose that and just to lose that bias, let's say,
Yeah.
and then come back to the vehicle, and then I would notice, oh my god, this is horrible. Actually, what was I thinking? Um, but that that in itself is like one of the
Okay.
difficulties of this project because you can learn to play with any kind of vehicle, and it doesn't mean that it will be good for the players
Yeah.
afterwards.
It's more so that
I
you've adapted to it rather than it becoming
yes,
good. Yeah.
exactly. And one of the things that our players, I believe, complained about is that vehicles are difficult to control. They're spinning out too easily. They are sliding, and yes, those things are true fundamentally. Like that, no one can deny that. But it's just that maybe at that point we got so good at playing with that type of vehicle. Like
Yeah.
it's no longer. I mean, if you put me on, I don't know, what can't I do? Snowboard, for example. You put me on snowboard, I would die on the first
Yeah,
corner. So
exactly
to
the
say.
same. But the more I play, yeah, because I mean, I think that's probably like where it came from. Because I had to do a lot of the like gameplay tests and showing them off when we were at Gamescom, and now it's like I pick up the supercar and I'm just good with it because I played it back to back to back to back. I know where like all the ejection best ejection points for me are. I know where all the pickups are, so I can just make sure I hit every line, and that's because I adapted to it rather than necessarily it being like having a distinct pick up and play ability. And I think, yeah, you can definitely, if you focus on something for 2 months for too long, you definitely block out everything around because you're just like, right, okay, cool. So it's cool to see that you do have to sort of tear yourself away to be like, right, let myself reset and then jump back into it. Especially with like, I know there's a couple of people who work on the vehicle balancing, so I can imagine it can get a little bit testing in that regard sometimes. So did you always think you'd end up in video games when it came to doing programming?
So to be honest, when I was super young, I didn't even believe it's possible,
Okay.
because so I come from a generation where let's say Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 were the main consoles,
Yes, we're about the
but
same
I
age then.
was yeah, but I was fortunate enough to also play like on some older consoles like
Okay.
SNES, NES, whatever, Commodore, like by just by chance I was exposed to those as
Mhm.
well as I was
Yeah.
growing up, and I was always fascinated by that. And maybe this will sound ridiculous, but so since I come from Bosnia
Mhm.
originally, and at that time there maybe were a few. I'm talking when I was like 12, 13, whatever. There were like maybe one or two studios, and none in my hometown, but
Yeah.
like few 100 kilometers away and whatnot. And then at one point, I have noticed, if you know the game Serious Sam,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that game is actually developed by a Croatian team,
Mhm.
which is our neighboring country, and it's like not that like couple of hours away from my hometown. And that got me thinking, like, well, if these guys can do it, like, okay, there is something to this, like, because at that time, Serious Sam in particular was a smashing hit,
Oh yeah, it was
and it
huge.
was done by a handful of people, which was amazing. They like they have built everything from scratch, and um, for such game to achieve such success and so on, that I think that was kind of a triggering point. And the second thing was that I have read in some article that there is this. Now I know that's a dev kit, like, but back then I didn't know. It's like a version of PlayStation, which you could use to make like homebrew games,
Yeah.
or to build homebrew games and to test them and whatnot. And that just blew my mind. Like there was a dinosaur on the cover, and you could you could do something with the dinosaur. Of course, I never had access to it, but I think that was so. Like I would say, like 12, 13, I already knew I want to work
So you were like
in
video
video games.
games and that's it. So are
Yeah,
you
exactly.
you're a bit of a game. I'm assuming you're a gamer in your home time as well when you're not at work.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What's your go?
So
What are you playing right now?
so latest game I have played is the Ninja Turtles
Okay,
Shredder's
Shredder's
Revenge.
Revenge. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. This, I mean, it's a bit of a mindless game to
Oh, it's
play, but
great. I love it.
it's awesome. It's I just like the this like nostalgic factor to it and how well it's executed actually. So
Yes.
it reminds me of the old games, but it's executed as a new game. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it gave me
Um,
like mad Streets of Rage vibes, Golden Axe vibes, but in like a 2020 game.
exactly. Yes. And the game probably spending the most time is the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and now with the
Okay.
remake, I'm just like I have a problem. Let's put it that way.
Were you so the big
Uh,
question for like Tony Hawk's fans
yes,
were Tony Hawk's or Skate? Which one?
Hawks, hands
Tony
down,
Hawk's all the way?
all the way. Yes, particularly after this remake. So Tony Hawk's 1+2. I
Yeah.
don't know if you had chance to play it, but
I
it's
haven't played it
amazing.
yet. I've heard great things, but I haven't had a
Yes,
chance. I was always I'm gonna break your heart, but I was always more of a Skate fanboy than a Tony Hawk's
I
fanboy.
mean, Skate is also amazing. Like no one can deny that. But for me, it's just a thing that I have played the Tony Hawk's since the PlayStation
Oh
One
yeah,
days
since I was
and
young.
continued playing until today. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have some gamepads that can witness to that that are like ruined, broken.
Do
Yes,
you find yourself when you're even when you're at, like even once you finished work though, do you find yourself still programming, being like, oh, I wonder if I can make my own skateboarding game or whatever, and you find you're doing like your own thing outside of work?
am I allowed to say that actually? No, just kidding. Actually, yes, yeah. That's the thing. I think that in our industry, like the if you don't program games because you like doing that.
Mhm.
So if you're doing it for just for employment, just for money, like you're in completely wrong job. I
Yeah,
can say, and I can say like at the moment I have like whatever 10, 15 prototypes of some random
just
like
constantly
ideas
working
that
on
I would
random
have at the
stuff.
moment. Yeah, maybe I have. It's a bit of a coincidence when I said that I had kind of experience with the vehicle simulation and so on.
Mhm.
It actually came from a personal project that I was. So when I was working for this other company, which was more focused on mobile games and like something a bit
Yeah,
different than what we do here, I was developing this. If you know like Twisted Metal, I
yeah,
guess
yeah. Twisted Metal, love it.
so I'm like also a huge fan of that game. Probably a bit more nostalgic because those games now when I play them, of course, they didn't age well.
No,
But
not quite.
um,
Great games at a time, and like
exactly, I mean,
Sweet Tooth will always go down as like an iconic PlayStation character, but
exactly.
it doesn't quite
Um,
shape up these days, sadly.
yes, but and on my spare time, I was just developing a vehicle combat game.
Cool.
Um, uh, well, not in Unreal, in some other in Unity, whatever. But the same principles apply in
Mhm.
the end, and I was able to translate that knowledge into this project.
That's
That's
cool.
so. And I think for any like game programmer, I would be curious to meet someone who doesn't prototype on the
Yeah,
side as well.
literally
That would be
everybody I've spoken to so far is my passion is what I do at work. So like
yes,
I do like my Twitch streams and my video editing in my own time, which I then do for powwow in the similar vein. And then Christina, she was talking how she programs in her own time, and Martin plays music in his own time, and it was and Max does art in his own time. Those are all the people we've interviewed up to now, and it's crazy that there's no divide between work and passion. It's the same thing, and it's unreal to see that in across all people that we've interviewed so far.
Pretty
And
much everyone, yes.
it seems to just be the thing. If you're in the games industry, it's because you're passionate about your discipline, your school, your area that you're working in. I don't know if that could be said for some of like the less dev heavy people, such as people who work in like as producers, etc. I'm not quite sure how passionate they are about certain aspects, considering they're not as, I guess, in they're not in Unreal fiddling with things, but it'd be interesting to see if the passion for at least gaming is there.
I still think, at least in our company, to my knowledge, there is no one who like dislikes games.
Yeah,
Like
there's
even the opposite. Like the most of the people I have talked to are like passionate gamers first,
yeah,
and
100%.
then um, because maybe so maybe our industry is a little bit underappreciated for that aspect, for the difficulty and the complexity of the job.
Mhm.
And especially I can imagine also for your work, like reaching let's say a big or substantial amount of people is difficult. You need to put like hours in research and production and pushing the
Yeah.
content. And it's the same for programming. Like we are solving, I mean, without sounding like full of myself or whatever,
Go
but
for it, man.
we are solving pretty difficult problems.
Yeah.
And I had a chance to work. So, like I mentioned before, like in one of my previous jobs, and also after that, I have worked as as an embedded software developer. So meaning like software for like these small microcontrollers
Yeah.
and low-powered devices. And while those are really like difficult, games are not far away from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and such jobs are always considered like the pinnacle of programming and whatnot. I don't know, but to my experience, it's not far off. Maybe the games are just more enjoyable to work for me
Yeah.
personally, of
I
course. I
think
can.
if you've got a person if your hobby and your job intersect, there's always a little bit more passion behind it. I mean, I've always been into video games, so now to work on them, I mean, I've only been in the industry now, I think 5 months, maybe 6 months or so, coming up to now, and I obviously went to Gamescom quite recently, and I had to actively keep reminding myself, you're at work, be professional, you're at work. But like when you walk into these halls and stuff and you see these booths for games that you have like you've seen all the trailers, you've read all the articles, you've been like, I'm so excited for that game. And then you see people who are working on them. For me, as somebody who is admittedly massively nerdy, but for me, that's like meeting your favorite band or your favorite like movie star. Because for me, it's like, holy shit, you're the guy that did this in this game. That's amazing. Can I pick your brains? Because I want to know how you did everything. And I can imagine that person is like, please stop talking to me, you freak. But I'm like really excited about it.
Probably not actually. I think, like I said, it's a passion-driven
Yeah.
job, and no one would. I hope like no one would find it difficult to talk about it or
Mhm.
even off-putting. Um, I mean, you can maybe check some if you see some interviews or GDC talks or
Yeah.
podcasts or whatever of some. I dare saying giants like I don't know. John Carmack comes to mind, like
Yeah.
probably the most praised, deservingly so, game programmer ever,
Yeah.
or at least in top five. Like, um, and he will endlessly talk about some quite like technical problem and would even try to explain it in, let's say, a commoner language.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Which is pretty amazing, and it's not really a thing that happens across other industries, I would say. Like
Mhm.
people will, after finishing with their work, people would always try to stay away as far as possible from
Yeah.
it than
Have that
to
work
come back
life separation. Yeah.
exactly. And just being like part of that whole, like you said, meeting any kind of a rock star or a movie star or something like that, for me it would be meeting some of those like founders of the game industry.
Yeah,
That would be like it would blow
same.
my mind.
Like it is always crazy, and like there's I met like one of the devs for Lies of P, which is a title I'm really excited for, and I was like, I want to pick your brain because I just want to express that I'm really excited because you are making something here that is like impressive, and it's always I think maybe in some respects, for every time I've spoken to a game dev and been like, hey, can we have a chat about the game you're working on? 90% of the time they're like, hell yes, because they
Yes.
do just like talking to people who are like, I don't want to criticize. I don't want to like say like or anything like that. I just want to know how did you do this or how did you do that? And they're like, oh, great, yeah, let me tell you. And I always think there's this automatic sense of pride that it's like, wow, somebody noticed that I did this and they want to talk to me about how I did it. Yes, let's go. And I think like, even in this conversation, straight away, when we were talking about like the vehicle handling and the work that you've been doing, straight away, there was a sense of pride where you were even like, I don't want to, toot my own horn or anything, but 100% you should in some situations because when you're working on something that you are passionate about, it's good to have that sense of pride with the final like piece that you're putting out there, I think. Um,
It's actually funny because when I was just starting in the industry, I had a chance to go to one conference,
mhm,
um, and I have met a person who works as an animator, and this
yeah,
is like so. Still, there was a benefit of having a common language. So
mhm.
because we come from the similar region, and we actually recognized ourselves by our English accent, so because it's a bit harsher and a bit like this like Slavic uh, pronunciation of some letters. So we started chatting, and like the person is like, I don't know, like maybe 15 years older than I was at the
Mhm,
time, and it was the most relaxing. Keep in mind, back then I was working on some tiny game
yeah,
for mobile or some website and something like really nothing worth mentioning. And the person was like super interested in how do you do that, how do you do that, and then we started talking about their work and how they do the animations, the motion capturing, blah blah blah.
mhm.
And in the end, they tell me like, yeah, yeah, now we are working on this Witcher game, and I have worked on Star Wars and I don't know, Black Widow for Marvel, like what the-
Wow, okay.
as like one of the leads in the animation, which just like blew my mind. Like you're so humble. What's
And yeah,
wrong?
you're chatting like equals, even though they've worked on like these high profile things. I definitely
Exactly.
something that I've noticed is there is this appreciation amongst the industry for everybody, no matter at what level they're at, and I think
Yes.
that's really cool. But anyway, I feel like as much as I love this path of topic, we might want to. We probably should circle back to Stuntfest before we get too far away from it. So,
Yes.
one question that I've asked everybody I've had so far: if you could add one thing to Stuntfest, what would it be? Absolutely
So
anything.
So, this is a bit difficult coming from a programmer's non-creative mind. Um,
It might be
just
something
for the
programming based.
just for a difficulty of it, I think adding some kind of motorcycles and all the problems that come with them
Oh,
would make my life really interesting, guys.
we have had so many people being like, so motorcycles, yeah? And every time I've had to be like, no, because if I even throw that idea at the dev team, I
Yes,
don't think
sadly,
I'll
yes,
live to see tomorrow. Not a
yes.
chance.
No, no, that's why that's why if I had like magical powers, of course, I could say, but something that's a bit grounded in reality, but still like super difficult at the
I
moment.
mean, I'm a
Would be
massive motorbike fan, so I'm not gonna say no to it. But we can confirm here, but no motorcycles. No motorcycles.
agreed. Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
that's
So one last question, super sort of quickly, is huh, just gone straight out of my head. You know when you have that thought and it's right there, and then as you go to grab it, it just disappears. That is
yes.
exactly what's just happened. If you were to say to anybody who's looking at Stumpfest and umming and ahhing about it and stumbled across this podcast, what is there anything that you'd say to them or like to convince them to come play Stumpfest? Now I'm really putting
Um,
you on the spot.
so hmm.
Or is there one thing about the project so far that really stands out to you?
No, I think uh, hmm. I will give you a bit longer answer to that because Stuntfest comes with a bit of legacy, let's put it that way,
Hmm.
and people have a bit different expectation than what the game turned out to be in the end.
Yeah,
I would still maybe urge them to give the game a chance and just to try playing one whole stunt show
yeah.
with some streamers, with someone, just to see the level of madness and
I, cou-
excitement that
I couldn't
it
agree more.
generates.
I think
Yeah.
Stuntfest, when you there's no words that you can use when you explain it to somebody that does it justice.
Yes.
It really is like every time someone's asked me like, can you explain it to me? I'm like, look, either watch me play it or play it, and you will see that no matter how we try and explain it, we'll either miss out some facet of it or we'll just not do it justice in terms of just playing it because it's
No,
crazy.
I guess you have witnessed endless playtests where people were screaming from excitement.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where there's some people who will jump in the playtest and they'll be like, okay, I'll explain it to them like 18 player elimination tournament, but you have to use gadgets and vehicles and different sort of events, and obviously I'll explain it more in depth than that. But they'll be like, okay, okay, and you can see like the cogs swirling in their head and them trying to piece it together, and you're like, look, just come play and I'll show you, and then they play it, and within like the first like 3 minutes when they press that button, they eject out the car, and then they go, okay, I didn't expect that, and then they go, oh, so while I'm out of the car, I can do this, and then I can just summon my car and keep going, and it's like, yeah, and now imagine breaking that all down and doing different events based on everything you've just learned, and they're like, okay, and then within like 10 minutes when you start introducing other players, they're challenging each other. They're like, hey, meet me in this area in the hub because we want to see who can get like higher scores. And then it comes to races, and they're like, I'm gonna get you. And then it's yeah, it goes from sort of like curiousness to okay, let's go. I want to keep playing. Even
I mean,
myself, I find
yeah,
myself getting caught up in that.
to a point, I think Christina mentioned this. It goes to that point, to a point that we are now naming shortcuts based on a
Yeah.
person who discovered them.
Yeah, and it's great
So,
because I will watch us in the playtests, and there's a few people who are really good at some of the races, and they'll send me their footage afterwards to make clips and stuff from, and I'll watch their footage to be like, there must be a shortcut that I'm missing here, and a couple of times I've been like, I didn't even realize you could do that. I didn't even realize you could go that way. Okay, cool. This adds a whole new thing, and
that's
it's
a bit of a, let's say, when you say to giving a game a chance and so on, that's a bit of a tragic part where the game is perceived as a racing game
mhm, yeah,
first and a vehicle racing game, and it's almost as far as possible from that, I would say. Like
yeah, very
vehicle is
much.
probably even the slowest way of transportation in our game.
Yeah, it can be in some
Like
situations, like the
some situations.
vehicle. Yeah, you have to bring so many skill sets together to really get the most out of Stumpfest,
Yeah,
and you can by all means just sit in your vehicle, and it's good for some people. But if you want to get the most out of it, if you want to be number one all the time, you have to bring these two skill sets and merge them together. But hey, so it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you today. Thank you so much for not only your time because I realize we're super busy right now with the next sprint. So thank you so much for taking time out your day to join me, but also for the conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I would very much like to do this again when we can
likewise.
reveal more
Thank
and
you.
we can chat more about the vehicles at length.
Yes.
But right now, sadly, we can't due to not giving too much away. But hopefully next time as well, we'll be able to do it while playing the game live on Twitch, potentially in future. So everybody who's been watching, make sure to keep an eye out for that. Twitch.tv/Stuntfest. Have you got anything left to say or last to say to the wonderful viewers?
Oh, nothing. I mean, besides stay tuned and maybe for younger viewers, if you are interested in game development and so on, I would just say to go head first. Now at least you have so many resources, so much stuff to
So
do.
many.
Don't get discouraged if your game if your game is downloaded 3 times when you release it. It's normal.
Yeah,
But yeah, just I would say I mean maybe I'm a bit biased with the game developer, but yeah, if you're considering it, I would I would suggest just go ahead first. Try
yeah.
to make
Jump
something,
straight
put
in,
it out.
both feet.
N-
See how it
Nothing
goes.
can go bad there. to be
Yeah,
honest.
couldn't agree more. Especially with like YouTube and everything like that these days, you can literally just Google
Exactly,
something and
exactly.
get your basic steps. But yeah, so yeah, thank you very much for being here. It's been very, very awesome. Everybody who's watched today, thank you so much for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me and David today. Make sure to click the like and subscribe button if you have. If you've got any questions you want to ask our next guest or ask David the next time we're having a Q&A, drop them down below in the comments and I'll grab them later on. So thank you very much and have a great day. See ya.